The first hand that reached for Stella came from behind a concrete pillar in parking level B2, fast and low, aiming for her mouth before she could inhale. She twisted on instinct, shoulders slamming into the edge of her own car door, keys cutting her palm as she dropped them. The second man blocked the lane near the ramp, a black van idling behind him with its sliding door already open. Her throat locked and her hearing narrowed, until she could only track shoes scraping cement and the pulse hammering under her jaw. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket at the exact moment the first man lunged again. She did not have room to run, so she moved where she could, driving her heel into a shin and folding against the car frame to keep from being lifted. The phone kept vibrating, an insistence against her ribs, and she understood in one bright, cold second that someone expected this minute, this floor, this corner near the service elevator where cameras had been out for 3 days. A gunshot cracked from the far side of the row, not close enough to hit, close enough to freeze everyone for one fraction of a breath. The man in front of her turned his head, and that mistake gave her one step toward the emergency stairs. Her phone stopped vibrating. It started ringing instead, loud enough in the enclosed concrete to sound like an alarm. Unknown number. Same pattern of digits she had memorized 2 nights earlier, because she knew her life depended on answering it on the first ring. She swiped with a shaking thumb and heard Joseph Hassan's voice, low and level, as if he were discussing freight schedules, not the moment she might disappear. He gave 4 instructions in 6 seconds: stay in the light, move left toward the yellow column, keep talking, do not look back. She obeyed before fear could argue. Men in dark suits came through the fire door behind her, 2, then 4, then a 7th figure she recognized from the executive floor. And the shape of the night changed. The men by the van ran. One slipped, recovered, got 3 steps, and went down under a tackle that looked practiced. Joseph's people did not shout. They worked in silence and zip ties. Stella reached the yellow column, pressed both palms against the paint to keep upright, and tasted blood where she had bitten her cheek. Joseph stayed on the line until someone she knew said her name directly into the phone and took it from her hand. 48 hours earlier, she had still believed this was an accounting problem. In 2024, when Stella Volkov took the junior reconciliation analyst job at Hassan Maritime Holdings, she chose the role for one practical reason. Reconciliation was detail work done inside systems, not on docks, not in boardrooms, not in places where people asked personal questions. She could sit with invoices, manifests, maintenance claims, and vendor ledgers for 10 hours straight and leave with clean numbers or clean doubts. The salary covered rent on her 1-bedroom apartment over a bakery that opened at 4 in the morning, and it let her stop taking weekend bookkeeping gigs for cash. She told no one she had a brother. She told no one she used to sleep with her phone in her hand. Mikhail Volkov had vanished in 2019 after agreeing to testify in a port corruption case that touched men with clean suits and dirty reach. Names never printed in the newspapers. Decisions made in rooms without minutes. The police took a statement and gave her a card. A week later, they stopped returning calls. An investigator she paid privately told her the file had stalled. She learned a pattern in those months. Ask too loudly, and people stop meeting your eyes. Ask too often, and someone explains consequences in a parking lot. Survival taught her to ask small, specific, and late. Years later, that rule translated into one narrow move: request document review and nothing bigger. And the narrowness kept her off formal whistleblower lists long enough for Joseph's intervention to reach her first. By 2026 week 1, she had been at Hassan Maritime long enough to know where errors came from and where they did not. Legitimate maintenance invoices varied in labor hours, replacement parts, fuel surcharges, overtime codes, and docking delays. Fraud had texture too, and this one looked polished, almost respectful. Northline Maintenance billed 6 separate invoices across 6 separate vessel support events, each one for exactly $47,600, each carrying different line item descriptions, each approved by the same authorization chain, and each ending in sense patterns that repeated in a way no true maintenance stream did. She did not notice it because she was suspicious. She noticed it because her brain stored noise until the rhythm broke. She rebuilt the packet twice before escalating, exporting supporting logs, cross-checking vessel IDs, matching timestamps to dock entries. The total discrepancy came to $285,600, and she wrote that number in her notebook, then circled it once. If she was wrong, she would look paranoid. If she was right, someone with authority had signed fraud into the books. Her first escalation stayed deliberately small, direct supervisor, then accounting compliance queue, then a request for document-level internal audit pool permissions, no allegation memo, no external report, no language that would trigger a broad alert. The request sat unopened until evening. When she checked status at 9, access denied appeared with Chief Financial Officer override. Kareem Daoud's digital signature sat under the rejection. Kareem Daoud was everything Stella had learned to distrust in polished form. He remembered birthdays. He sent precise follow-up emails. He could explain margin compression to interns and make them feel grateful. He also controlled sign-offs that determined which questions were legitimate. At 10:12 the next morning, he stopped by her desk with 2 coffees, placed one by her keyboard, and said she had done diligent work, then asked why she had bypassed him on an issue that was already under executive review. She had not bypassed him. She had used procedure, and he knew it. Her fingers went cold around the paper cup, while he smiled and reminded her that ambitious analysts often misunderstood complex vendor structures. That conversation resolved one hesitation and created a bigger one. Until Daoud spoke to her in person, she could still pretend the denial was administrative friction. After he spoke, she knew the obstruction was intentional, which meant normal channels were not slow. They were compromised. She could not escalate through the chain without alerting the same person blocking her. Her only remaining move was to preserve the documents and wait for a chance that might never come. She copied every relevant file into a time-stamped encrypted archive on a hardware key and kept it in the false bottom of her work tote, a habit from years she wished she could forget. 2 days passed between her report and the call, and those 2 days stretched strangely, ordinary tasks layered over rising threat. She reconciled bunker fuel overages, corrected duplicate customs entries, and ignored how often Daoud's assistant appeared near her aisle. She stopped taking the same route to lunch. She waited for crowded elevators. She watched reflections in lobby glass before stepping outside. On the second afternoon, at 4:36, her desk phone lit with an internal extension she had never seen. When she answered, a woman introduced herself as Nadia Rafay and asked if Stella was seated. The voice was calm in a way that made denial useless. Mr. Hassan would speak with her directly. Joseph Hassan did not waste language. He said her full name, asked whether she still had all backup files, and told her to come to the 41st floor in 7 minutes using elevator C only. She looked up instinctively. The 41st floor was not on regular employee access. No one she knew had been there. Nadia was waiting when the elevator opened, tablet in hand, black suit precise enough to look like armor. And she did not offer small talk while leading Stella through a corridor lined with framed maritime maps, older than any company in the building. The carpet swallowed footfall. Doors had no labels. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive coffee. The office itself made the power imbalance material before Joseph spoke. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the port, cranes moving like patient machines over water and steel. A single desk sat far from the door, matte dark wood with nothing unnecessary on it, while two men stood near a side wall that looked like decorative paneling until one touched it, and a hidden screen lit with live camera feeds from loading bays. Stella's entire workspace could have fit inside the seating area rug. She felt the cost of everything around her in the smooth leather, the hand-knotted weave, the silence purchased by thick glass. And she understood who controlled outcomes in this city. Joseph Hassan was younger than rumor and older than his face when he listened. He wore no tie, sleeves rolled once, watch steel and understated, and his attention felt like direct pressure, not curiosity. She placed her folder on the table between them and began with invoice sequence, approval path, repeated sent signatures, and blocked audit access. She expected interruption. He let her finish. When she reached the number, $285,600, he repeated it once, then asked for the 6 invoice IDs in order. She recited them. He already had one memorized, and that detail unsettled her more than any raised voice would have. He made 2 calls while she was in the room. In the first, he asked Treasury to place temporary holds on outbound payments linked to Northline maintenance until he released them personally. In the second, he told security to pull camera logs from finance corridors and elevator banks for the previous 72 hours and mirror the files to a server access list that excluded the CFO office entirely. He did not tell her she was safe. He altered systems around her in real time. The practical decision resolved the access barriers she could not breach, making continued cooperation possible without exposing her to Daoud's gatekeeping. Before dismissing her, he asked where she lived, how she commuted, and whether anyone outside work knew her schedule. Every answer felt costly. He listened without visible reaction, then told Nadia to reissue Stella's badge with restricted routing, no isolated basement access, no late exits without escort. He instructed that any request from Stella would be routed through Nadia without delay, regardless of hierarchy. Nadia nodded once and entered it into her tablet. Stella felt a strange, confused relief, because she had expected suspicion and received procedure. Joseph finally looked at her directly and said, "If anyone from finance contacts you privately, you forward it. You do not reply." Returning to her own floor felt like stepping from one climate into another. Fluorescent light hummed. Printers jammed. Someone argued about vessel insurance riders near the kitchenette. Her desk looked unchanged, except for a slim envelope waiting on the keyboard containing the new badge and a card with 1 number on it. No name, no logo. She locked both in her drawer, then moved the encrypted key from her tote to the inside pocket of her blazer. At 6:14, Daoud appeared at the far end of the row and stopped when he saw her escorted by a security officer she had never seen before. He smiled anyway, too long, and turned away. That evening, she stood in line at the bakery downstairs, listening to trays slide into display cases while her shoulders remained high and tight. She realized she had not unclenched her jaw since the 41st floor. Her apartment smelled like yeast and radiator heat. She checked window latches, checked them again, and sat at the table with her laptop open to harmless expense spreadsheets while replaying every second of Joseph's office in order. He had called her directly because command channels were compromised, and that fact should have made her feel protected. It made her feel visible. Visibility had always been the start of danger. The next morning, week 1 midpoint, Nadia called before 8 and asked Stella to come up again. Bring no device except building badge. Use elevator C. The request altered the internal geometry of her day before it began. She had planned to keep this confined to invoices. She had planned to remain useful and peripheral. On the 41st floor, Joseph was not at the desk. He stood in the side room behind the panel wall, where shelves held hard copy binders beside secure terminals disconnected from the regular network. He handed her a printout with account routing codes she had seen in the North Line packets and asked if she recognized the sequence ending 941. She did. Immediately. He placed a second file beside it, thin, marked with an internal tag that looked old, updated across years by different hands. The first page carried a name she had not seen in 7 years. Mikhail Volkov. Status line redacted, logistics entries coded as housing rotations, medical cash allocation, identity maintenance, and off-book transport. 3 payment streams fed the file. One was legitimate port security retention. One came from a discretionary operations reserve. The third was the account she had flagged through North Line maintenance. She stared until letters blurred. The discrepancy she found was not only theft. It sat inside the channel that kept her brother alive. Joseph said he had taken her call personally, and the moment her surname matched this file. And the room shifted from executive interview to something personal and irreversible. The room tilted without moving. She braced one hand on the edge of a metal cabinet and tried to pull air deep enough to steady the shaking in her ribs. Joseph did not touch her. He did not speak over her. He waited until she could focus and said Daoud had embedded false invoices into that channel because nobody would risk auditing a witness custody stream tied to criminal testimony. The siphon worked both as theft and camouflage. Daoud blocked audit logs for one tactical reason. The access trails would show credential laundering into the custody channel and expose his extraction path. Any clean audit pull could have collapsed his cover in hours. Her flagged $285,600 threatened Daoud's scheme and threatened Mikhail's location security at the same time, which explained why resistance had turned personal so quickly. She heard only half the sentence after witness custody. Alive repeated in her head until it lost meaning and returned sharper. Mikhail was alive, had been moved repeatedly, and had remained hidden outside state systems because the original prosecution leaked. Names reached people who should never have had them, and official protection collapsed. Joseph's network had taken over custody through arrangements no court would acknowledge. The reveal resolved the emotional distance between them in one brutal movement. She was no longer an analyst who found a bad ledger. She was the sister of the man hidden inside it. And Joseph was no longer using her only for utility. He was now guarding a person tied to a promise already inside his own file system. Trust became personally costly and unavoidable. She asked one question first. Not where he was, not why she had never been told. Only whether Mikhail knew she was alive and working here. Joseph answered yes. He had received proof of life updates through an intermediary twice a year, never direct, never location linked. He slid a single sheet toward her, recent and sparse, with Mikhail's handwriting on one line she recognized from childhood grocery notes. Stay visible only where they expect you invisible anywhere else. Her vision narrowed at the edges. She folded the paper once and held it flat on the table with both palms until the trembling eased enough to stand. Everything after that accelerated because delay became risk. Joseph asked for every interaction she had with Daoud, date, time, wording, location, and she provided it from memory, down to the coffee cup lid he rotated while speaking at her desk. He assigned 2 internal investigators from outside corporate finance and ordered parallel reconstruction of the 6 invoice approvals, including keystroke logs and credential pathways. He also changed her immediate reporting line from finance operations to a temporary forensic unit under direct executive authority. The specific obstacle this resolved was clear. She was previously trapped under the CFO chain that could silence her, and the reassignment made truthful reporting structurally possible. Daoud responded by becoming gentler in public and more precise in private. He sent her an email praising her initiative and requesting a confidential correction meeting off-site to avoid cross-department noise. She forwarded it to Nadia. 10 minutes later, building security circulated a notice that no finance employee was authorized for off-site audit meetings without legal present. Around noon, Stella noticed the same silver sedan idling opposite the bakery entrance where she usually crossed. It stayed through lunch and was gone by the time she returned. When she told Nadia, Nadia documented plate fragments without asking Stella to repeat herself twice. Week 2 began with controlled normalcy and failed quickly. Stella arrived to find her workstation moved closer to a populated cluster, a transparent adjustment that announced she was under watch. She handled freight tax reconciliations for 3 hours, while 2 different men from facilities checked vents near her desk without tools. At 2:17, her HR profile flagged an unauthorized password reset attempt originating from a device assigned to executive finance. At 3:04, someone accessed her employee emergency contact record and exported it. She had listed none. That empty field saved her from exposing anyone else and confirmed the hunt had shifted from documents to leverage. Joseph called her directly at 3:11 and asked where she was standing. She answered, "Aisle C, near records cabinets." He told her to stay there until escort arrived. His voice carried an edge she had not heard before, tension compressed into precision. 3 minutes later, 2 security officers walked her to a conference room with no exterior windows and remained outside the door while she worked from a laptop that booted through a separate encrypted environment. She understood the pattern now. Every threat queue she reported produced immediate logistic changes. Safety was no longer abstract. It was a sequence of locks, escorts, route edits, and access partitions shaped around her day. That evening, she considered packing 1 bag and leaving the city on a night bus without notice. The impulse lasted 7 minutes. She sat on the edge of her bed, shoes still on, duffel open, and mapped consequences the way she mapped ledgers. If she vanished, she would lose the controlled perimeter Joseph had built. If she stayed in routine without telling anyone, she would become easy pickup. If she asked for full extraction, she would owe protection she could not repay. Her old rule, ask small and late, had already failed the size of this crisis. She texted Nadia one sentence, "I need a safer exit plan tonight." Nadia replied in 14 seconds, "Car at 2030, lobby east door." The car was an unmarked black sedan with a driver who never turned to look at her. He took a route she did not recognize, doubling through service roads and stopping once under a bright gas station canopy, where another vehicle passed slowly and continued. She reached her apartment building at 9:18. The driver waited with engine running while she went upstairs for documents and 2 changes of clothes. She hesitated at the framed photo of her and Mikhail at a public pool, both sunburned, both squinting, and left it on the shelf because carrying memory in visible form felt reckless now. Back downstairs, the driver accepted her bag and said only, "Seatbelt." She asked to stop at the office garage for her car keys because tomorrow would be easier with normal appearance. The driver contacted someone over earpiece, received approval, and turned toward headquarters. That decision placed her in parking level B, 2 at 10:47 p.m., where the van waited with its door already open, and two men moved as if timing had been provided. The set-up tension loop closed hard and reopened immediately into survival. She fought because fighting kept oxygen moving, and she answered Joseph's call because his number was now the one command line she trusted under pressure. This was the scene that had started her story when stakes finally became visible to everyone else. After the attempted abduction failed, Joseph's team relocated her within 30 minutes to a controlled safe housing unit on the waterfront, 12 floors up in a building owned through layered shell entities that did not appear on public records. The apartment was fully furnished in neutral tones: stocked refrigerator, spare phone, blackout curtains, reinforced entry frame, and a silent lock system keyed to rotating codes. This level of comfort made her uneasy for reasons beyond fear. Class contrast pressed in from every polished surface. Her old place had peeling paint near the bathroom vent. This place had imported stone counters and a view of cargo lights crossing the harbor like moving constellations. The relocation order was explicit. Her old apartment was now a burned location, and she could not return to sleep there under any circumstance. Joseph arrived just before midnight, with Nadia and 2 security leads. He examined the bruise blooming along Stella's shoulder, asked whether she could raise her arm, then asked what the men said before contact. She repeated the one line she had heard: "Package first, call after." Joseph's jaw tightened once and settled. He turned to the security lead and issued 3 directives. Pull all traffic cam data within a 3-kilometer radius of the garage, trace van ownership through both legal and ghost registries, and detain any contractor who serviced B2 cameras this week. The controlled rage was unmistakable in how precise he became. Not louder, only sharper. By sunrise, one of the attackers was in custody, injured and talking under pressure from people who did not file reports. His statement tied recruitment to an intermediary already linked to Daoud's private contacts. Joseph used that thread to execute containment before midday. Daoud was called into what he believed was an emergency treasury meeting in an off-site conference suite. Security teams loyal to Joseph isolated elevators, confiscated devices, and moved Daoud alive into a private detention pipeline used for internal breaches, where public legal process was considered a liability. Stella learned this from Nadia in clinical terms: no theatrics, as if announcing schedule changes. At 11:40, Treasury froze all active and pending payments tied to North Line maintenance, and 5 adjacent vendor entities connected by overlapping tax identifiers and recycled insurance certificates. Legal notices were drafted for regulatory cover. Internal communications framed it as anti-fraud remediation. The speed looked unrealistic from outside. Inside Hassan's structure, it was plausible because Joseph controlled banking relationships, executive sign-off, and coercive enforcement in one command chain. The immediate obstacle resolved in that hour was active pursuit. Without Daoud's access and payment channels, the men looking for Stella lost both instructions and money. They could still choose violence, yet their coordination fractured. Stella slept in 90-minute intervals through that day, waking each time to new details and the same body response: dry mouth, cramped calves, a tremor in her right hand that worsened when she tried to hold a cup still. She worked anyway. Nadia delivered scanned ledgers to the safe apartment through secured tablet, and Stella mapped 3 years of maintenance billing for pattern siblings to the original 6 invoices. Her competence remained intact because danger had not removed her skill. It had removed her margin for error. By evening, she found 2 additional suspect clusters pending approval, both now blocked before payout. Joseph read her analysis remotely and requested full escalation memo under her name. On day 3 after the garage attack, Joseph called to inform her that proof of a life confirmation for Mikhail had arrived through the custody channel. It included no location, no voice, only time-stamped biometric verification and an updated transfer log showing he had been relocated again as precaution after Daoud's removal. Relief came as pain first. A tightening behind her sternum so sharp she leaned forward over the counter until it passed. She asked whether she could write to him. Joseph said yes, through one-way drop reviewed for operational risk. She wrote 6 lines that evening and deleted 4, finally sending 2. I kept looking. I learned where to stand. Work resumed in modified form by week 3. Stella reported to a forensic finance room on the 17th floor. Windowless, badge-gated, staffed by analysts she had never met before, and one former port auditor with scar tissue along his knuckles. Her start time varied daily. Routes changed. Escorts remained mandatory between office and vehicle. Some employees noticed and avoided looking directly at her. Others watched with open curiosity. The organization had understood she now held protected status, even if they did not know why. Nadia's behavior made the rule visible. Any request Stella sent received response inside minutes. Calendars shifted, doors opened, obstacles disappeared. The first time Daoud's name was spoken in that room after his removal, conversation paused and resumed without comment. Stella felt the old reflex to shrink, to become administratively invisible, and recognized she could not return to that strategy. Isolation had been her safety method for years. It failed against a threat with internal access and external muscle. The emotional claim between her and Joseph began not with tenderness, with jurisdiction. She heard him tell a security chief outside the conference door, "She does not wait in lobbies," and the possessive form landed before any softer admission ever could. He still had not named what she meant to him. His logistics had named it repeatedly. One evening near the end of week 3, Joseph asked her to come to the 41st floor after regular hours. The port below looked different at night. Sodium lights stretching along docks, tugboats moving like careful insects between hulls. He handed her a printed summary of the North Line investigation. 6 fraudulent invoices at $47,600 each. Total documented discrepancy, $285,600. Plus associated diversion attempts intercepted after her initial report. He added that criminal exposure tied to Daoud's network was now compartmentalized. Public charges might come later under unrelated financial statutes. Internal consequences had already occurred. He watched her scan each line as if checking whether the numbers still held. They did. She asked the question she had avoided since midpoint. "Why did you call me yourself?" Joseph looked past her for a moment, toward cranes on the water, and answered in operational language first. A compromised chain cannot be asked to investigate itself. A junior analyst can disappear in bureaucracy or in a vehicle. Direct contact removed intermediaries and cut leak risk. He stopped there, then added one more sentence that shifted the room. When he saw Mikhail's surname on her file and matched it to custody records, he decided she would not be handled as disposable staff. The words were measured, almost formal, and they struck deeper than apology would have. She told him she had spent 7 years preparing for proof her brother was dead, never for proof he was alive inside a system like his. Joseph accepted that without defending himself. He said the state failed him first. The street finished what the state began, and she was free to condemn both. He placed a secure phone on the desk and said it was hers under protocol. No tracking outside their network. Direct line active at all hours. This gesture resolved the final hesitation she carried from the beginning. She had been unwilling to ask for help because help always carried debt she could not pay. This arrangement named debt openly and replaced helplessness with terms. The following Monday, Stella returned to her old apartment for 30 minutes under escort to collect the rest of her belongings. The bakery owner downstairs asked if she had been traveling. She smiled, said work had moved offices, and kept her answers short. Upstairs, she packed books, documents, and the pool photos she had left behind. She paused in the doorway once before leaving, noticing how small the rooms were, how every corner had once held fear she called routine. She locked the door, handed keys to property management, and signed the protection memo Nadia had prepared confirming permanent transfer to controlled housing under direct status protocol. She did not look back on the stairs. In the forensic unit, her analysis became central to a broader cleanup that extended beyond Northline. She trained 2 senior analysts on the sense pattern method she used, teaching them to read for repeated microsignatures hidden across legitimate noise. Her authority came from precision, not title, and people listened because her findings had already survived violent resistance. Nadia began scheduling Stella into meetings that previously required director rank. No one objected aloud. The hierarchy had been rewritten around necessity, and everyone understood who authored that rewrite. Joseph rarely attended those sessions in person. His absence did not reduce his presence. Decisions arrived before obstacles hardened. Mikhail's second proof-of-life update reached her 12 days after the first. Same one-way channel, same sparse format. One additional line in his handwriting, "Good work follows patterns." She laughed once when she read it, the sound unfamiliar in her own throat. She sent back 2 lines again. "I found your trail and numbers. I am not alone now." She did not ask for location. She no longer believed knowing coordinates equaled safety. The private wound she had carried for years changed shape here. It did not vanish. It stopped dictating every decision. The immediate threat had been neutralized in concrete ways. Daoud was removed alive into Joseph's private detention pipeline. Northline channels were sealed. Attempted abductors were identified, dispersed, or detained. Stella's movement, housing, and work access operated under formal protection status, recognized across the organization. The larger world remained dangerous, and nobody pretended otherwise. She still checked reflections in glass. She still mapped exits when entering rooms. She also slept through full nights sometimes, something that felt almost suspicious in its simplicity. Safety had become specific, conditional, enforceable, and tied to one man whose capacity for violence made his protection real. On a rain-heavy evening at the end of week 3, she stood in Joseph's office while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the harbor. Nadia had just left with updated security schedules. Joseph reviewed a shipping brief, signed 2 pages, and set them aside. He looked at Stella and asked whether the new escort rotation worked for her morning commute. The question was mundane, the type of detail that had become their shared language. She answered yes, and added one request. She wanted access to archived dock maintenance logs from 2018 to 2020 to finish tracing legacy anomalies tied to Daoud's period. He approved it immediately and told Nadia through the intercom to clear the request now. No delay. She moved toward the door, paused, and turned back long enough to hold his gaze without flinching. He said her name once, not as command, more like recognition, and told her the car downstairs was hers for as long as needed. Possession lived in the logistics again, in vehicle assignments, access lists, and who could stand near her without permission. She understood the claim and accepted it on her own terms. Not as surrender, as alignment inside a world where institutions had failed her years ago. When she stepped into the corridor, Nadia was already waiting with revised credentials and tomorrow's route printout. The elevator carried Stella down from the 41st floor, toward the lit grid of office levels where ordinary work still pretended ordinary rules were enough. She held the secure phone in one hand and a folder of reconciliations in the other. Numbers clean, signatures verified, pathways mapped. Her life was not restored to what it had been, and she did not want that version back. She had a brother alive in motion, an enemy removed, a dangerous ally who had made room for her without asking her to become less competent, and a future measured one controlled step at a time. Outside, the rain kept falling over cranes, ships, and a city that still owed many debts.